Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to remind you that we are on patreon.com/some laugh. You can sign up for as little as £3 a month, or you can give us more if you want to support us. But it gets you access to hundreds of cool benefits like
access to all of our previous live shows that have always been a good laugh. London, Glasgow, Edinburgh, that kind of thing.
Some behind-the-scenes footage from the Glee Club, from a 45-minute documentary from the Fringe last year, and some behind-the-scenes footage from the Pavilion, as well as the entirety of the show, not just the edited highlights that are on episode 100.
You will also get access to many bonus episodes that we've already done.
Yeah.
Currently topping them up once every 2 weeks. And that tends to be the three of us fucking around. It's loosey-goosey. It's the rawest form of the podcast that a lot of people apparently love.
Yeah. It's all tits and teeth in the public, but over there it's all ass and holes.
And if that doesn't put you off, then sign up for the Patreon, because that's where to get all of that. Not literally, it's not an OnlyFans, but you know, you general, you get the idea.
We're not posting hole over there, I want to make that clear.
Not yet, unless there's demand for it, in which case, let's talk.
But you can, you'll support us. It keeps everything ticking along with the normal podcast too. So thank you to everyone who does. And everyone who hasn't, Steve, what can they do? They can suck a fat one.
They can suck a fat one, baby. Please enjoy the episode, and we'll see you real soon.
See you soon.
Enjoy. Welcome to the Some Laugh podcast.
It could be like, oh, that was some laugh, or there was just some laughs.
Some laughs.
Well, no promising all laugh.
No, there's going to be some.
It's some laugh. Well, what I'm most interested in, you just had Jeremy Vine on your podcast.
Yeah.
But is that not the second time that he's come on to one of your podcasts?
Yeah, because we had him on Trash Future maybe like 2 years ago. And then we had him on, we had him on Glue Factory recently. Yeah, I have like a long-standing sort of I don't know, it's a dalliance with Jeremy Vine.
Does he just like your impression of him or something?
Because I started doing the impression more recently because I got into, so basically my mum used to listen to Radio 2 a lot, and then because I kind of moved in with her during COVID, and then so I was exposed to long-term Radio 2, and I was like, what is this? And the Jeremy Vine show would come on and I would immediately be captivated by it because it's just like sort of you know like when they do one of those bores of a tree to find out how old it is, and they just sort of pull out this long strip of ancient wood. It feels like doing that, but like with the insanity of the British people. Like they're just sticking this big apple corer into the big hive mind of Britain and just like feasting on the goo inside. And so like every day it would be on, and it would be like, okay, we do phone in. What's the loudest household appliance you have? And these people were just like, well, Jeremy, I'll tell you what, my wife's hairdryer, it's deafening. Look, listen, and they're just like, can you turn it off now? What? Like, yeah, just utter chaos.
It is funny because you know how like I was watching that documentary, the Vince McMahon one, and it was sort of talks about how you understand Trump, like you can understand him better like through the world of wrestling, and I feel like with Britain, you can probably understand a lot of what's going on in British politics through stuff like radio phone-ins and shit like that.
Yeah. It feels like it's very unique, the British radio phone-in, because they have it in America, but it's much more like milquetoast. It's like people yelling about politics, whereas here it captures the perfect mundanity of British life. Because I'm also obsessed with that. There's a Twitter account called Great British Getty Images. I don't know if you're familiar with this. And they just post just these kind of insane like Getty Images pictures of Britain. It's like, you know, Cherie Blair at the premiere of Ben 10 Alien Force. And you're just like, that is this country. It captures it like you can be mates with the Clintons and the Pope, but you cannot escape Ben 10 Alien Force. Like that is like on some level this country will drag you back down to the premiere of Ben 10 Alien Force, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Who was the guy before Jeremy Vine? It was the right stuff
on the right, Matthew Wright on the right on the telly.
What was his vibe? Because I remembered him from remember Bo Selector brought out a Christmas song, Proper Crimbo. And Matthew Wright made a cameo at the start. They'd done like a Thriller parody.
Oh, okay.
And he gets interviewed in an Adam Curtis documentary as well. I think probably the only two person that's both true of. He's in a Bo Selector video and an Adam Curtis documentary.
Meanwhile, on Channel 5, something quite different was taking place, and no one was watching.
But then something strange happened.
It's quite funny actually in retrospect that like every Channel 5 program was just like slagging off the unemployed and stuff. And it's like that's who's watching Channel 5.
Yeah, it's like 2:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Who do you think's watching this?
It's like Britain's fattest, most unemployed people. It's like your audience, yes. Why are you going at them like this?
But yeah, was he like? Because I feel like Jeremy Vine is quite a right wing skewing audience. I would imagine was the right stuff the same? Is it just a sort of?
I think it's basically the same program, is it not? It's just like different host.
The Vine on 5, because I'm not as familiar with Jeremy Vine's TV oeuvre. I think it's a bit wackier than the Radio 2. Because I think my understanding of the Jeremy Vine broadcasting philosophy, as I now seem to be the only, I'm like the Kremlinologist for Jeremy Vine, because no one ever just like asks him, and it's sort of weird. I feel like all of these people come at Jeremy Vine with like a lot of preconceptions about what Jeremy Vine would be like, based on mostly what people say when they phone into his radio show. But he has this kind of like Buddha-like. He's like, well, you know, my job is to just let people say their piece, and, you know, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and then I just kind of move things along. But I think he kind of has a sort of like centre-leftish kind of sensibility. He's kind of like a lot of media people. He's not like a right-wing or kind of, but he's also like hosting a BBC radio show. So he's like, well, you know, it has to be like balanced, and you have to like let people. But he has this kind of like, I would describe his approach to the callers as one of like, whereas someone like James O'Brien will just be like, you're an idiot, which is sort of like pot kettle, you know, but anyway. And then Jeremy Vine is kind of like Socratic Elenchus. Like he just asks people questions until gradually what they're saying collapses in on itself. And he goes, okay, that's all we've got time for. Thanks.
Because like they are so incredible. Like, because often what will happen is somebody will just take like a 15-second snippet of just something he said that must have happened every day. Just out of context, particularly like just like those impressions you're doing, like it just sounds so crazy and like off the wall. But
like the guy that went missing in like Ibiza or whatever, and someone was like, he was reading out all these tweets of people's suggestions, and then it clearly, it was like someone was like, oh, you should shout out Auto Glass Repair and see if he shouts back Auto Glass Replace. And he had a wee smile, and then he was like, no, I don't get that one actually. When no one laughed.
Yeah, some of the photo topics, I mean, I think my favourite one he ever did was are ISIS the most evil group of all time? Do we have to go back to the Nazis to find a group as evil as ISIS? And then there was a bit where he was like, I can't remember the guy's name. He was like, Terry from Kent has texted in. He says, don't forget about the Khmer Rouge, Jeremy. They were pretty evil. It's like, okay, thanks. And he was like, this is Phil Collins to studio. It's so good. It's pure. Yeah,
that is great.
I also didn't know that his brother is the comedian Tim Vine.
Tim, yeah.
I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, that was the thing that happened when he was on our podcast, because he kept talking about like just Lucy, just like my brother, and I was like, Tim Vine. he kept refusing to name him, and he was like, yeah, me and my brother. I was like, Tim Vine, and I did this like 15 times.
I think because that's what everyone is thinking. Oh, you're talking about Tim Vine. I'm just picturing some random guy. No,
it's a guy with a football on his head.
Also famous guy, Tim Vine.
The pun man.
Yeah.
They're a fascinating combo, aren't they, those two? They're like
what was going on in their house growing up?
Yeah, I don't know.
I want to know.
A lot of debates, I presume. Debates and puns. Which was the debate parent and which was the pun parent?
That's true. Because the thing is with Jeremy Vine, if he's letting everyone have say their piece, Tim's just sitting in the corner going, that's an interesting phrase. I could make a pull back and reveal about that. Because like it's interesting to have like two brothers both in showbiz but are like kind of in different lanes.
Really different.
And like a presenter, I suppose it's probably very common because it's very.
And Jeremy's the funny one. That's what's so crazy.
He's been on your podcast. Tim's not made an appearance.
Yeah, that's the mark of success in this business. Being on my podcast. Yeah, I mean, fuck. I almost feel bad with someone like Tim Vine because I can't disguise my contempt for what he does. But I'm sure he's very nice. Yeah. I'm sure if I met him, I would feel so bad about my contempt for what he does because I'm like, what a pleasant man.
You hate like puns and stuff.
No,
yeah.
I was one time sick. Someone done a pun so bad that I had a coughing fit and I was sick through my hands. That's my claim to fame on puns.
A pun made you vomit. Can you remember what the pun was?
It was so tortured. It wasn't even. It was one of. I think it was.
I can't really remember. I know I've heard it before, but you need to remind me what it was.
I think it was the Pish-wearing Ann one.
Great punchline already.
Which I don't even. I think it might be like it's like a very Scottish.
Someone's nan who's scared of piss.
Aye.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. And they worked backwards.
She was my push weary now.
And sorry if you're listening, but that made me sick.
So that, but you don't need to apologise. I think it's constructive feedback. Just like, well, people have vomited.
I've actually got the opposite. I like watching a comic that's doing one-liners because I've always said it's like watching penalty kicks. Because like, see if you're regardless of whether they're good or bad, right? See if you're watching a bad game of football, open play, it's boring. See if there's a penalty, you watch it, and certainly a penalty shootout, it's like one-liners because you're like, it's like, oh, that one fucking skied it over the bar, but this next one might go in. Or oh, he hit the post, he nearly got it.
Yeah.
Oh, that one actually went in. You know, it's good. Like it's just boom, 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 rather than having to listen to them.
Could you watch an hour of penalty kicks?
I'm not saying an hour, but I would rather watch a bad 10 minutes of one-liners than a bad 10 minutes of just a guy talking, like conversational.
Interest.
I feel like whenever I meet a one-liner comedian, for me, I mean, and no offense to one-liner comedians, but I feel a bit like, you know, the flying instructor must have felt at that flight school in Florida when 19 Saudi men turned up and wanted to only learn to fly the plane and not take off or land. And I'm just like, I mean, sure, like that bit of flying the plane can be useful, but also it has no effect without the other parts of, you know, I'm immediately suspicious. And, you know, as much as we can all enjoy 9/11, I feel as though it's a short-term enjoyment.
How do you enjoy 9/11?
It's not going to get you to your destination.
No, that's very true. And well, I mean, it does there's a lot of people, you know, that have done it, but I feel maybe it's like do you think it's a dying art now? The one-liner.
We can only hope.
I think so. I mean, it's just a really old-fashioned way.
Did you think it when I said a dying art? Did you think doing
9/11?
9/11?
It's not many 9/11s anymore. Is it?
Which is a shame. I think the standard of terrorism has gone down.
That's it. I was very impressed with how well you articulated in that special, Milo, how, you know, because we're obviously, I guess, all millennials and talking about what it's like being that versus a Gen Z. And the thing that made me sad was when you're talking about how, like, you know, they see the Arctic Monkeys as like classic rock. But like, isn't that just, it's just like a kind of constant creeping thing where you're just having to kind of accept we are old now.
Yeah,
it's brutal.
It's horrible.
Sorry, any older people listening, I know it's all relative and all that, but we are definitely not. We are not in our 20s. That's what you need to accept. And
no, we're not.
Clinging on for dear life, I guess. Some people are, but...
That was another joke that was a hard sell in the show. That was like the bit where I'm like, oh yeah, people on TikTok are saying the Arctic Monkeys are classic rock. TikTok indeed. And then the amount that would work like 50% of the time. And I'm like, it's the sound a fucking clock makes. What are we not getting here? People were like baffled by it. And it wasn't like not laughing because it's not funny. It was like not getting it.
Right.
Yeah. Because when they did get it, they'd laugh a lot.
Yeah.
And so, baffling.
It's funny though, because like, even we start like to go back to like Jeremy Vine and listen to, because I listen to Five Live a lot, right? And I just like listening to the radio sometimes.
That is cursed.
Well, I know, but do you know what it is? Yeah, I know. It's just because they either talk about politics or football, which is the main two things I'm interested in for the most part. But I can't listen to some of the presenters, don't get me wrong. But anyway, I do like Adrian Childs, I will say that. But he's good, man. He's good. He's great. He's similar, like where he'll just like they're just. I think it's like the kind of, it's almost like a self-aware, like. Almost like we know this is Virgin on Partridge, but
we interviewed him as well.
Did you?
And it was so funny, because we were talking about his column, and he was like, look, honestly, you try and come up with something to put in a newspaper column every week. He's like, I tell you, look, anyone listening to this, right? If you can come up with a better idea for what I should write in my column, send it to me, and I'll send it into my editor, and we'll see what they say.
That's great.
Yeah,
no, I think he's brilliant on radio. I feel like he was so tarnished by that bit where he went on the telly and everyone hated him for a bit because he got so much money and he was meant to be like one of us, wasn't he?
Because he also did the World Cup coverage in 2010 for ITV, didn't he? And he just like for a man who he has that same thing that Keir Starmer does, where despite clearly being a football fan, when he talks about football, he sounds like someone who's never watched a game of football in his life. And I don't know why that. I feel like I can talk. I hate football, but I feel like I can talk about football more intelligently than Keir Starmer can, and I don't know why that is, because he actually likes football.
But what I was saying was like, because when it comes to like listening to the radio, because like it's almost like you're clinging on to the last things that are like a kind of shared tradition, and you're like, this is probably going to go at some point. This is going to stop being a thing, maybe. Yeah. But I like to get that thing of like, you know, in a film, and it's like they turn on the radio and something's, the president's been shot, or there's a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
But and it's like, you like sometimes you tune into breaking news on the radio. There's an excitement. You feel like you're living in and you're also part of a communal thing. Everybody's listening at the same time. Whereas Mirror just siloed and listen. Keep listening to the podcast, but listening to it, like
this is replacing radio, isn't it?
As I suppose
the aliens invading and immediately being like, "Take me to your 4 biggest podcasts. Get me on Have a Word. I will announce the new order via the Scouse." There's like 50 guys in Barrett Homes suddenly shitting themselves. Fucking hell! You heard about this? Hey, aliens! I don't know. I unplugged the telly.
but I think it's that live. I think it's the aspect that live and everybody experiencing it at the same time that I maybe miss, like tuning into something.
Yeah,
at the same time.
Yeah, I do miss that as well. But also, I'm impatient, so I'm like, I can't be arsed with waiting for things. You know,
Yeah.
I do enjoy but like a series is just there, 6 episodes ready for you. I enjoy that aspect.
No, that stuff like that is good, but what I think I'm getting at is like when you talk about like Gen Z folk, they probably just like growing up, our parents and stuff would have had like the radio on in the car or even just the TVs on, and I feel like Gen Z folk more and more they've not grown up with that maybe because they've just everything's just been the internet forever, and you're like I feel like maybe they would look at that sort of love for radio and go, what the fuck you...
What's your favourite Peppa Pig swapping heads with Spider-Man video from YouTube? Exactly. You know, what are your fond childhood memories? Call in. Sort of Gen Z Jeremy Vine being like, what do we remember about childhood? What was your favourite Jake Paul moment? Phone in. We're taking your calls.
But that is basically what it will be, isn't it? Like, and I just think that, I don't know.
Yeah, but then again, I suppose it's like they probably won't all have this shared experience because it's so wide, and they'll have their own wee channels on YouTube that they'll watch. So you probably couldn't have like a general thing.
There's never going to be like a Peter Kay of Gen Z because like, remember this, and you're like, well, no, because there's like a very
and they wouldn't put big lights on, would they? Because of the cost of living. That's right. Leave a big light on when you're going out. You're kidding? We're not even going out. Can't afford it. We're making Nando's at home.
The bag and bake is good, to be fair. But
Gen Z boomer is like a powerful concept.
Great character.
Gen B parents, they'd be watching Love Island, wouldn't they? They'd all be picking their favourites.
Imagine you went to see the new Peter Kay tour and that's what it was. It was just him
Probably.
It was like so relevant to Gen Z. He's completely skipped a generation. He's like proper down with the kids.
Do you remember? You'd say, "Oh, that's choogy. Oh, that's a bit choogy. Why did we say that? Why were we saying that?
What was that about?" You're good at the old accents. See, when I was watching your special, it felt like you were slipping into like almost like a Brum accent. Have you got any Birmingham in?
Not as far as I know.
No.
But this would be a great way to get diagnosed. 23 and me.
I think there was a comment that like a Belfast accent. Have you got anything?
No, again, not as far as I know. I mean, my surname is Edwards, which is like Welsh, I guess, but I've never. There's no. All of my grandparents are kind of shit-eating Cockneys, as far back as I'm aware, and so I'm the only one in my family who doesn't sound like I'm half white van. That's it sounded like there was sort of an intensive breeding program between sort of the people of Essex and transits at some point, and that produced most of my relatives. But yeah, I sort of I've I've climbed out of the gutter, and I've now reached a point where people are calling me posh, and I'm like, no, I was just told that this is what you have to do.
Yeah, so
Sound like this.
You went to Cambridge, is that right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, what did you do?
Classics, which has further
Arctic
alienated
Monkeys.
me from exactly. Arctic Monkeys, the early Jake Paul videos before he started boxing. That would really be
The golden era.
Yeah. Well, I now find myself in the position where I know about all of this weird Gen Z internet shit because I have to talk about it for a podcast, and then I will sometimes bring it up to like my university friends or whatever, and they're like, "Why do you know about that?" And I'm like, "Not, I stress, through any kind of interest, other than a sort of forensic one."
I know.
I was like, "Oh, imagine just like not knowing who Jake and Logan Paul are. Like, what a blessed existence that would be."
Beautiful.
Isn't it? No, mad. That's such a mad thing now. It's like the stuff that's so big on, well, I guess still on Twitter, but just generally on the internet, like the stuff that's like trending or whatever. And then like you go out in the normal world, and obviously when we are doing shows and stuff to audiences, you bring this thing up, and people will just stare at you blankly sometimes because they have no idea what's going on, even though it could be the biggest thing. Even to the point where sometimes something gets so big online that it gets covered in the news, but people still won't have heard of it.
Yeah. I was gigging last night. I brought up, I was talking about people are too horny nowadays and sort of thirst traps on Instagram and stuff. You know the song, Somebody Gonna Match My Freak? You know that one?
Yeah,
and I brought that up and no one had a clue what I was talking about.
Well,
Are you guys not horny as well? Do you not watch these videos all day long?
That's on the Stephen Buchanan playlist all day long.
Yeah, it's a great song.
It's already going
And
to be
has anyone matched your freak? You know?
Well, yeah. Is this girl nasty? I want to know.
Well, I will admit, I didn't even know that was a song. I've just heard I've just seen people write on Twitter and stuff looking for someone to match my freak. I thought it was just something people.
You're experiencing it in fragments, like you're in late antiquity. Like, there was this source that we know of, like it exists only in the retellings of like other later sort of Hellenistic historians. That was sort of there was presumably a song "Match My Freak," but we only know it via reference points.
Yeah.
That is literally
Because there must be a million Match My Freak songs out there.
I always just assume
probably,
when I see all these things, I just assume it's been like some viral tweet, and everybody just starts saying it. Yeah. It's like it's giving, or that's this kind of shit. I don't know. As you say, I don't know the source material for this stuff.
Yeah. Match My Freak was actually an offensive version of Guess Who from the mid 2000s. It was a tie-in with one of those Channel 5 programs.
Channel 5
it's just pictures of people from the job centre, and you just had to, It was all right then, that was allowed back in those days.
Channel 5 dating program.
You really can just spin a wheel with the Channel 5. They go like, job centre dating. There's one.
I would watch that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds great.
I think a great one for barometer if like people are like poisoned by the internet or not. Ask someone about Jordan Peterson. Yeah. Because if you're internet poisoned, you'll have an opinion either positive or negative. And what I've discovered is people who are like properly normal, they are aware of Jordan Peterson, but only as a self-help book author.
Yeah.
And they regard Jordan Peterson the way you would regard like Paul McKenna. Like they have this completely neutral, the guy who wrote that book, the one about making your bed or whatever. Oh, yeah. Like it's in the way where like no one who knows anything about Jordan Peterson could possibly have such a neutral opinion. But it's like only like, you're just to you. You haven't read any of his posts. You're not either on board or off board. You're just like, the guy with the book.
It's just another book. It's like the subtle art of not giving a fuck or whatever. It's like, in that section, they're like, that guy, him. But
You've not seen the video where he like cries about like, woke or whatever.
Woke Merlis.
People. And then they told me that they're adding another pronoun. It's very sad. What's happening? And he's like dressed like the Joker for some reason.
Do you think like older people know about like you obviously know about J.K. Rowling, but like are they aware about her views and stuff?
I don't really think so.
They just think they just don't give a fuck.
But then they also probably didn't read Harry Potter either. If you think about it, like.
But they'll know of it if they've given it to their children.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
oh no, the normals are fucking obsessed with Harry Potter. I've come into contact with this largely through people like my girlfriend knows. Like not her like friends. I stress to add, she has more dignity than that, but just kind of like extended connections. Just like the amount of people having like Harry Potter themed weddings and like, and also I don't think they're at all engaged with like J.K. Rowling and her like whatever. But like
it's like people that still play R. Kelly.
That's separate art.
Let's just say
that's the music, not the tie-in board game, which was discontinued. Yeah. Although with stuff like that, I mean, it's kind of funny how like it just goes one way or another. Like sort of like Michael Jackson is just like, we've just decided that you can just play Michael Jackson, and that's fine. We've decided the music is good enough to outweigh the paedophilia. That's
also, though, he didn't get charged, did he?
Yeah.
Or he didn't get.
Well, he was dead.
Yeah.
Well, no, the trial was over, wasn't it?
Yeah. He was tried.
That's true.
But I mean, there were so many different. I mean, I guess it's like a thing where people are trying to do due process on Michael Jackson, despite the overwhelming. There's funny to gesture at this man who looks like he's wearing a Halloween costume and built a fairground ride for children in his back garden, and also has multiple allegations of child abuse, and also talks in a child's voice and being like, I just don't see why. He's just such a normal bloke. I just don't think he could be a nonce. Meanwhile, at the same time, you're like, Hillary Clinton has a basement full of children.
In a pizza restaurant for some weird reason.
Yeah, like 100% did it, but like I guess you can just pretend that for yourself. You'd be like, well, he didn't, he's not in jail or he's dead, but like he didn't get put in jail, so it's fine to still listen to Thriller.
It's a weird thing though, right? See if you did want to be moral about it, right? Say you're at a wedding or a party or whatever, and Michael Jackson comes on, like, is someone going to go up to like the DJ and be like, hey,
turn this off?
Do people do that?
Let's listen to some proper music, like Gary Glitter. All right.
My mum still listens to his Christmas song. She refuses to delete it.
Which one is the Gary Glitter one?
It's the Rock and Roll Christmas.
As to be honest,
it's good, to be fair.
A good tune.
It is a good one. She said it's good, so I'm not deleting it.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
I mean, fair enough. I'm actually in camp. Who cares? Not in the sense of like who cares about the sex crimes. We should care about those.
Yeah,
but in terms of like, it's someone whose music is really old and people like it, and they're not even working anymore, and they've done sex crimes. I think what's the point?
They earn so little money from the fucking plays anyway.
On Spotify.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, in a way, they've actually they're preventing anyone who's like accused of anything in the future of earning royalties from because they get so little money for a play anyway. It's actually a genius move from them.
It is.
Yeah.
You can argue that. I suppose.
So we can listen to everything guilt free now, knowing that the artists are getting absolutely nothing. I just assume they're all paedophiles.
Is there anyone you would draw the line at?
Oh, that is I don't know.
I guess the whole point is that you're not saying it's about the person, isn't it? It's about.
But is there anyone you would still be like, I mean, I would listen to R. Kelly, but I'm not fucking listening to.
Yeah, I think I get it more when it's sort of people who like where the art is more just them. So when it's like stand-up comedians, it kind of gets to a point, well, so sort of to enjoy your stand-up comedy, people kind of have to like you. Yeah. So it sort of becomes untenable to have that relationship with the audience.
Hard to watch a Cosby these
done
days.
Anything that
I don't care how good his mic technique is or whatever the fuck it is people say about it.
Mic technique?
That's what they all say.
That's like brute.
They always say he's got good mic technique. He holds at his knee and he controls the crowd and all that.
I've never watched.
But was it? See if you listen to like loads of interviews with comedians, some of whom have subsequently also been cancelled. They often cite Bill Cosby himself as like one of the best stand-up albums ever.
That's very funny. Saying that a comedian's got great mic technique reminds me of my girlfriend went to a wedding where the father of the bride opened his speech with, "She's beautiful on the inside."
One thing you cannot say about Bill Cosby.
He was hot. Don't get me wrong, he was hot, but terrible personality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alright guys, Mark here to let you know that I'm going on my first ever stand-up tour of the UK and Ireland, and tickets are on sale right now. I'll be coming to Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Dundee, Perth, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle, Cork, Dublin, Belfast, Birmingham and London. If you're in any of those cities, I will hopefully see you there. If you have enjoyed the podcast, if you enjoyed my previous stand-up specials, I think you're going to love this show. It is my best one yet, and I'm bringing it all over the UK and Ireland in the summer of 2025. So I'll hopefully see you there.
It's funny though, isn't it, that both the hosts of Kids Say the Funniest Things in the US and in the UK were both embroiled in like career-ending scandals. It's almost like a curse, because it was Barrymore over here.
Oh, was
Wow.
it?
Yeah, I actually lived round the corner from Michael Barrymore when the whole dead guy in the pool thing happened.
No.
I was about 5, and so the reporters were going around like knocking on all the doors, and apparently they knocked on our door, and I answered it, and I immediately began talking to this reporter from like the Sun or whatever, just telling him all these rumours about Michael Barrymore from around the village, and my dad like dragged me back into the house and was like, no comment.
Kids do say the funniest things.
Fucking hell.
And now he's on TikTok because everyone's too young to remember
Yeah.
on TikTok. He's
That's
massive on TikTok.
Yes,
Is he actually?
Yeah, he posts old clips and stuff.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
seen that clip that he's singing with like kind of gospel choirs and he's
I'll see you when you get there.
yeah, it's so good.
That's a crazy, because he had this whole show called Michael Barrymore's My Kind of Music.
Aye.
And he would just sing like popular songs, but like he couldn't really sing. And it was proper like cocaine television from the 90s.
It really looks like a scene, like one of those fantasy scenes from King of Comedy. Because it's like, it looks as though you're just watching his, like what he imagines he would like to do. He's like singing with a choir, you know, he's like the centre of it all, he's doing all
Talking to
the,
kids.
you're like, what, how is this, how did this actually happen and why was it considered entertainment?
I used to love Barrymore, see, when I was a kid.
I loved him on, what
loved
was that
Barrymore.
thing on the Saturday, was it the Generation Game or was it, there was that
Strike It
Davidson?
Lucky.
What was the thing
Strike
that
It-
Barrymore hosted on the
Strike It
Saturday night?
Lucky.
Was it?
Strike
Yeah,
It Lucky.
was it? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I used to love it. Mr. Saturday
Do you
Night.
remember? Your parents would be watching Barrymore, wouldn't they? They'd be sat there, they'd be shut up, my kind of music, son. He's singing Coolio. Quiet, kids. Sit down with your iPad.
So he's big on TikTok these days, isn't
Yeah,
he?
it's huge. And but did they do it, the whole pool thing? What?
Well, so Michael Barrymore, I've learned from his TikTok, is quite litigious. So here's what I'll say about Michael Barrymore. Michael Barrymore was he was arrested and questioned by the police over the death of Stuart Lubbock, and the charges were not pursued.
Okay.
The man died at his house, and the circumstances are murky. But also, there were a lot of people there, so
Yeah,
couldn't-
so it could have been anyone. It's a
needed-
murder
I feel
mystery.
like even there's never been a convincing version of events about what happened, other than the guy died. He had drugs in his system, and there was some suggestion of like maybe there was like a sexual assault of some kind.
Yeah.
But also there were like so many people at the party that it needn't. All we know is it happened at his house, but it needn't have been him necessarily, or like,
That's true.
if there was indeed foul play.
Yeah, because if
This is a true crime podcast now. Should we just get into this?
He slid into my DMs on Twitter when I first joined it because I seen he was on it. And at my first ever stand-up gig, I talked about Michael Barrymore.
Oh wow!
And because at the time, it was one line I had, and then it grew into like a 5-minute bit because he was on a show at the time called The House That Made Me, where all these celebrities would go back to their childhood home. And I was like, well, sure, the house that made them was
Yeah,
the one
yeah,
that guy
yeah.
died in. And then I ended up with this whole routine about him. But then I just thought it'd be funny to like tweet him in like 2012 or whenever the fuck this was. And he replied to me, and he was like really nice message. I never replied to him. So I've left him on red for like 12 years.
Flag
That's
him
fine.
now.
And he was very hurt by that.
Yeah, maybe that's what spurred him on to become a TikTok sensation. Just to,
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I saw a TikTok of his where he was like, the caption was something like that feeling when you've had a huge court payout from someone talking shit about you in the newspapers, which was clearly about the fucking the death in the pool. And then he was like just doing like a dance on a train platform and like mouthing along to like one of the Zoomer songs. And I was like, this is like psychotic break.
Yeah.
Like this is like the video they show when they're like, and then he stabbed 9 people at a shopping centre. Like it's like really close to the.
Yeah.
We have, because what I was saying about him at the time as well is I think he is like the British O.J. Simpson.
Really?
I think that was it.
But like in terms of how big he was
I think-
in his head.
And then it was a similar kind of time period, and it was a similar kind of prominent guy that get accused of this murder and then get away with it.
But it's also like typically mundane in British style.
Exactly.
It's like all the details are quite boring. It's like, yeah, he was barred from a few of the local pubs, He should write a book called If I Drowned Him.
Did you ever meet him being one of his neighbours?
No, I don't know if my parents did. I would have been too
I was
young.
actually going to
to
ask where were they at the night of the Did he invite his neighbours from 5 doors away?
my parents in balaclavas, sneaking into Michael Barrymore, using lard to grease up the poolside. They're like, we'll never know. This will jack up the house prices somehow.
Yeah. You never met him then?
No, not as far as I know. I did meet Richard Branson when I was a child.
Did you?
Wow.
My parents, my dad used to have an office for their business in Hong Kong. So he used to go to Hong Kong like all the time. And he managed to fly on Virgin Airways so much that we got invited to a party at Richard Branson's house. I don't know how many fucking air miles you need to get to redeem ticket to Richard Branson's house party. But yeah, it was baffling. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were like hundreds of people there. It wasn't like it wasn't like dinner with Richard Branson. We weren't like their number one customer. But yeah, it was odd.
That's crazy. My brother-in-law was saying that he works with someone who's Richard Branson's nephew, and he's never met him because he's just like a quantity surveyor from Glasgow or whatever, and he's never met him. But your dad's got some air miles and he gets to meet him.
Richard Branson's nephew has never met him.
Yeah.
Well, he's just like too busy on his like private island.
Yeah, I was like, does he go to the island? He's like, nah, he doesn't get invited, but your dad's there.
Yeah, not on the island. It was just at some house. And then you got
Branson's Island.
Yeah, Branson's Island. Just like a very boring version of the Epstein Island.
As far as we know, that kid. I mean, what was his parties like? I assume it wasn't some sort of Diddy-esque affair.
No, there was a Helter Skelter. I recall that, which is always. I mean, to be fair, that does have some overlap.
Michael Jackson
with the sex crimes garden party.
I'm sure he was on MTV Cribs. I'm sure I've seen his island.
Oh, okay.
I think it was
the UK version.
Richard Branson's showing off his closet full of different sandals.
I read his book. It was interesting, and he talks about starting Virgin Records and that kind of stuff. But then I don't know. It's a weird one, isn't it, the old Branson? Because the privatisation of NHS stuff and all of this.
Yeah.
I don't know where I stand on Branson, really.
Why is it all called Virgin as well? It's an odd choice.
It's a weird branding choice.
I think it was just a
If
joke.
anyone should have had the paedophile island, surely the man he was, maybe actually Branson was in on it and he was like a decoy. He's like, well, surely if one of the billionaires is a paedophile, it's got to be the long hair goatee guy whose company is called Virgin, who's always going on about his private Caribbean island. And he was just drawing heat off the rest of them. He was distracting them.
That was a good distraction. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so much.
No, I think
Maybe
Branson's
onto
bad.
something.
He's bad.
Yeah.
Is he a bad man?
I think he's. I mean, I don't think he's bad like Epstein type bad. I think he's just bad in the sense of like I think his company does bad things.
Yeah.
He's just evil that way.
Well, you know how they like? Because I was saying this to somebody the other day, but you know how like all the trains that you get, like like the one you'd get from London to Glasgow or
Avanti.
Edinburgh to Glasgow, but they're just Virgin trains that have just got a name changed and they've got different signs on them. They were all the Virgin trains for years, weren't they? And,
well, when they rebranded them, someone had to fuck them. That was the worst bit.
we need to take these trains virginity.
Do you remember when your dad worked at the train yard and he had to fuck the trains? They're not a Virgin train anymore. They're electric, they've not even got exhaust pipe. He found a way. You did in those days, you got on with it.
So you were saying that you're about to do another bit?
No, it was just the really like normal radio like transition you did there after meeting Peter Kay talking about his dad having a
Here's
job.
Phil Collins.
I would love to. I don't have a good Peter Kay impression. I would love to join in.
I don't know how good that Peter
Yeah, I
Kay
like
is
Brad.
really. It's just sort of vaguely northern. Like,
It was kind of more for Yorkshiremen.
yeah. Why is everyone from Bolton? Have you noticed this?
Who?
Like Vernon Kay, Peter Kay,
All the
fucking
Kays.
this is embarrassing now. No, but there are so many people from Bolton in media. There's like a bunch of Radio 2 DJs that are from Bolton. Like apart
Paddy
from
McGuinness.
But then
Yeah,
he's just-
Paddy
he's
McGuinness,
just Peter
I think
Kay's
is from
mate,
Bolton.
though. That's like
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they were all.
That's like when would
Yeah,
you like
that's true.
Jeremy Vine and Tim Vine from the same place?
from the same postcode.
It's like crazy, like the size of Bolton. It's like having that many people in British media from like Basildon. It makes no
Aye,
sense. It's like baffling. Like, what is this?
Never been to Bolton. What's going on there? Apart from creating
No,
comedy
I've
icons.
been to Wigan, which is nearby, but Wigan wasn't good. I stayed in a hotel in Wigan. It's part of it. Have you ever stayed in a Britannia hotel?
No, I don't think so.
Can't
So
say
they don't
that.
look great.
And no, they're not. It's a small chain. It was booked for me. I was on it. I used to do a bit of tutoring, and it was on this like we were going into like a grammar school doing a like Oxbridge prep day for these kids. I was probably about like 21, 22, something like that. And it was like I mean, it's like a laughably small amount of money. I think I was being paid like 160 quid for a day's work, and it was like an overnight stay plus expenses. So it was like basically it was so much effort for that amount of money. But anyway, I'm there, and they put us up in this hotel in Wigan. And it was like just the kind of hotel where it's like the kind of hotel that Alan Partridge lives in the first.
Yeah.
It's like nothing has changed.
Tavern.
Exactly, yeah. Nothing has changed since the 1980s. Everyone else who's staying in there looks like they're 3 days away from putting a gun in their mouth. Like it's like really bleak. And but there were all these like strange touches. I remember just sat in there eating breakfast, and they had one of those like conveyor belt toasters. Of the kind that just you never see outside of that kind of hotel. And then above the toaster was like a reproduction oil painting of Henry VIII. We're talking like a 6 foot high oil painting of Henry VIII. And this is a plate glass hotel built in like 1982. And there's just a portrait of Henry VIII. And it's also in Wigan, which I presume is not where Henry VIII is from.
I don't think he resided there anyway.
No, I wouldn't have said
No,
in that exact Britannia hotel.
Yeah, he loved a Weatherspoons.
I think he would love it.
Yeah, to be fair. Curry Thursday. Bring me another Ruddles. I'm just doing Brian Blessed, really.
Yeah, I reckon he would sound like that anyway.
Has he ever played Henry VIII, Brian Blessed? You'd think it would be a missed opportunity. That seems like a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Don't know much about Henry VIII. We weren't really taught about him in school, but I would just
You weren't
imagine
taught
it
about
as-
Henry VIII in school, did you?
Nah, we had a different
Do you know,
curriculum.
here's the thing that
It's like Montessori. Like, what was it? And I feel like Henry VIII is like the only thing you learn about in British school.
No,
well, I
the
think
English
it's an
skills.
England thing.
Yeah,
'Cause
maybe.
we don't really know. I don't know because it's the Tudor period. I
Yeah.
didn't know anything about. I didn't really know what a Tudor even was.
No.
until I got up later.
Yeah.
We got ancient Egypt, World War II, and
Martin Luther King, JFK.
Bit of a gap between those two. Okay, you
bunch
got
of
the
other stuff
pyramids,
happened.
right? Yeah, that went on for a bit, and then it was World War II.
pretty much.
Not even World War
And then
One.
Hitler.
You don't get World War One though.
We didn't get World War One. No, we didn't get taught about that.
They had Ramesses II and then Rommel. That was what was going on in Egypt.
I mean, we must have got taught. We got taught about the Battle of Bannockburn.
Oh yeah.
All
Yeah.
that sort of shit.
Barely. I don't really remember much about that.
That was.
I mean,
lightly
sure we
covered.
did get taught
Was
about
that
stuff.
was Bannockburn? Was that William Wallace or Robert the Bruce?
I'm going to
Bit-
say-
a bit of both.
Was it?
Bit of both.
Well, it was William Wallace, but it was Robert the Bruce, not the.
Do you know what I learned about William Wallace recently? I didn't know this.
Mm-hmm.
They fucking cut his dick off in front of him.
Yeah, hung, drawn, and quartered.
Well, it's hard to do it not in front of him, to be fair.
That's true.
Put me in the other room, when you chop my dick
You
off.
can do that wee trick where you put it in between your legs.
They did it like like how they do a cesarean, where like it's a local anaesthetic, but they have that little curtain. So you can't see it. Sort of
No, I think what that means they chopped it and then they hold it in front of it. But like,
Yeah.
what a horrible thing to do.
Yeah, no, they did that. They did not pull his limbs off.
Well, this is what. So is that what hung the quarter thing means?
That's
is
the rack you're thinking of.
Is that the
Did they
thing?
not
with
do
The
it?
horses.
Hung, drawn, and quartered. No, the horses. That's Genghis Khan. He used
Yeah,
to
that's-
execute people by telling them to.
good on the day with
Genghis
William
Khan
Wallace.
wasn't a king of England. Anyway, I mean, I'm sure he would have liked to have been, but he didn't make it quite that far. So hang drawing and quartering was they would hang you until you were almost dead. But
Take you
not in a
down.
way that would break your neck, just like suffocating you.
Yeah.
Then they would take you down, and then they would like cut your stomach open and like disembowel you. And I
Yeah.
think then they would cut your limbs off. And at
right.
some point in this process, you would die.
Right.
Hopefully
But
sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
The drawn part was, I'm sure it was like tied up and like stretched. And
So the
maybe not-
drawing is the cutting you open.
Right.
But yeah, the rack is like a torture instrument where they would stretch people until they gave them.
I feel like
yeah.
cutting off the dick is particularly sadistic. I would say
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's. Oof, no need for
I
that.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. It's ungentlemanly,
That is-
I think.
literally, it is basically. I think it's.
Yeah. Undignified.
I know.
It would be fair to say.
Yeah.
What was the? There's a dick in a jar. Is it Rasputin's dick?
People love Rasputin memorabilia.
Well, they say
Especially
he
his
was
dick.
apparently had some big massive dick, but I don't know whether it's like they've got it or not.
Yeah, they definitely, there is some Rasputin stuff floating around. Do you know the story about when they tried to kill Rasputin?
What's
So
this
it's like,
again?
there were all these like various like Russian dukes and princes who were like, this guy needs to go. He's weird. He's hanging out with the queen too much. He's making it weird. And then so they invited him for dinner. And then very funny that Rasputin went. He's just like, oh, all of these scheming viziers are inviting me for dinner. I must surely attend this. Surely they will make me tasty food.
Must have racked up enough air miles.
They are giving me this cake that none of them are having any of. It's clearly I am guest of honor. I must eat this delicious cake. Yeah, they gave him this like poisoned cake, which is very like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs already. And then he ate it and just like didn't die. He was just like a bit ill. And then one of them like shot him, but with one of those like old timey pistols where like the bullet was the size of a pea, and it just didn't do anything. He was just fine.
Bounced off him.
And then they tried to like stab him or strangle him or something, and he was just like once again fine. But eventually they got him to a point where they thought he was dead, and then they cut a hole in the ice on the lake and they put him through the ice. And then like a day later they recovered his body, and it had like ice under the fingernails from where he'd been like clawing at the.
Oh fuck.
And they were like, this guy just wouldn't die. And a lot of people were like, yeah, because he had supernatural powers. I'm like, either that or he was just a tank.
Yeah.
But the whole story, it makes it sound like he was just puzzled. Like he just, why have you shot me? What have you
Why are
done
you
that for?
doing that? I'm trying to eat cake here.
I'm trying to enjoy this lovely cake. I'm getting mixed messages here. You invite me for dinner. You make me lovely cake. Then you shoot me with gun. I'm starting to feel like I'm not very welcome, but you did not need to invite me. I could have happily gone and watched ice hockey or whatever. You asked me to come.
Now, Milo, we have stumbled on the topic of Rasputin.
Russia.
And I feel that we would be remiss not to ask you, because I don't know. I know you spoke about it on podcasts and stuff before, but you lived in Russia.
I did, yeah, for 3 years.
How did that come about, and what was it like?
You speak Russian fluently.
Да, конечно. Сейчас переходим на русский язык. Yeah, no, that would be an amazing twist. I was like, now we're going to switch to Russian. We all start speaking Russian. The whole podcast was an op. It's funded by Russia Today. We're slowly putting out a Putinist.
We are looking for sponsorship.
Yeah. It's my first time on the show, but I have been pulling the strings.
There's a gap for a Scottish person on Russia Today now that Salmon's deed.
God, was he on Russia Today?
Yeah, he was big on that.
Do you know how? Because there was a documentary on BBC Scotland about Salmon and Sturgeon, and it takes you through that bit where Salmon got his show on Russia Today, and do you know how he got it? Because they went and watched him do his show at the Edinburgh Fringe. He fucking got a telly show for the Fringe before any of us.
Incredible. Despite the sex crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe because of it.
Yeah.
Perhaps
yeah.
so. I don't know. That may have been before. I think that was before it all came out.
I have to say, I was behind the reflex of anti-Englishness, but then I found out about the sex crimes. I moved to Russia for like a gap year after university because I had a good friend of mine from university is Russian, and I'd been there a couple of times on holiday and I'd learned the language like a bit. And I was like, I reckon if I went there for a year, I could speak it fluently. Because I knew I wanted to be a comedian. I've been doing comedy before, but I was like, I feel like once I start down that road, I won't be able to do something like move to Russia for a year. So I was like, I'll do that now. I moved there. I was doing tutoring for like insane oligarchs and stuff.
Wow.
And then I got scouted because I was doing stand-up in English in like a little expat bar by some TV producers who came up to me after the show and they spoke to me in Russian and they were like, do you speak Russian? I was like, yeah, we're speaking Russian now, aren't we? And they were like, great. Do you want to be on TV? And I was like, sure. So they gave me their card. I then later discovered that they spoke no English whatsoever. So they had come to a stand-up show, understood none of it, and just gone like, this guy.
Star.
This guy right here.
Wow.
Yeah, I like his face.
What was the TV show? Russia
It was
Today?
kind of like that American show, Last Comic Standing.
Right, okay.
Where sort of every basically TV show in Russia
You just got
that's
this TV show the exact same way as Alex Salmon, by the way.
Yeah.
It's the same people.
Yeah, exactly. That was my plan. I like this guy, and he has big motorhome as well. It's really good. And so I got on this TV show. It was like a competition. I came second. And then I later found out some people told me that it was rigged and I'd actually won.
Oh,
but they wanted someone else to win.
Wow.
But
And
anyway,
were the rest of the people Russian?
that prepared me
on
for the rest
show?
of the. Yeah, I mean, the former Soviet Union, I would say. So like it's like mostly Russians, but like a few like Kazakhs and Ukrainians and stuff like that. Because this was sort of
Are you
before.
like the fucking Navalny or whatever of like Russian fucking game, fucking showbiz shows? What's his name? Alex Navalny. It was the guy
Alexei
that ran the
Navalny,
game.
the opposition politician.
You were him. It's like, it was rigged. I won.
Yeah.
Who won?
exactly.
Who won? Fucking Vladimir Putin.
Unfortunately, I wasn't beaten to death in prison. R.I.P. No, I mean Navalny is a dumb cunt. Well, was a dumb cunt. It has to be said.
Just because he went back.
Yeah, I mean, it was just so like it's like they're just gonna kill you.
It was
And
a
it's
bit
not-
Rasputin-esque. It's like he survived a poisoning and he's like, I was going to go back again.
Yeah, and he watched Rick and Morty on the plane. His last hour as a free man, he was watching Rick and Morty. Incredible.
Wow.
What a thought.
He could have watched worse stuff. Imagine he was watching
Yeah.
Barrymore.
Yeah.
Strike a lucky.
I love this, my kind of music. Look at him, he's doing Spice Up Your Life. He's very versatile performer. I don't know, yeah, Putin actually killed that guy in Barrymore's pool. He was getting too powerful.
It all add up. It all add
A
up.
nerve toxin in his system. Then I got a job on like kind of they have like a version of Live at the Apollo. It even aesthetically looks a bit like Live at the Apollo, but it's
Wow.
called Stand Up. In English, it's called Stand Up. That's just the name.
But you have to speak in Russian. You have-
Yeah. And they have like they have a rotating cast rather than it being a thing you get booked on.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like I was in the sort of second tier. There was like a kind of a main cast of people who'd been on it a long time who were like famous and they were on it more often. And then there was like a kind of like a newbies kind of class of people who we'd be on it less.
Yeah.
We were kind of in the same office and it was such a weird way of doing comedy. It's like something you'd never experience here where you'd be expected to come into the office and present them with material and they would like yay or nay it. And they would put you on gigs that they would organise with the most dour cunts imaginable. Like I've never seen anything like it. Like they had these gigs, they called them technichki, like technical performances. And they would give out free tickets to people who liked the TV station, like people on the mailing list or whatever. And there'd been these weird venues in like outer Moscow. And they would be people who I feel like had been like beaten from a young age every time they laughed. Like it would be like the most brutal gigs you've ever done. Like it would be like you really and like if they only wanted to see the really famous people and anyone who was not a household name, they were like, why am I watching this? And it's like the ticket was free. Like, what is your problem? Yeah, they were brutal gigs. And then they would sit you down with an editor afterwards and he would go through your video and he'd be like, this is shit, we're getting rid of it, this is also shit. But our favorite thing that he used to do was anytime you told a funny story, it could crush. Even at one of these horrible gigs, like you could tell a story that absolutely crushed, and then he'd be like, "This is story. We're taking this out. This story is not stand up." And I'm like, "Sorry, I don't understand the sentence that you just said. You're saying it's not stand up because it's a story." And he's like, "Yes, it's not joke. It's story." And I'm like, "Yeah, but stand up is a lot of funny stories." That's kind of, he's like, "No, not us. We take this away."
So like, I was going to ask, like, is there a Russian sense of humor, and what's the stand up like? Are they just like set up punchline or
There,
a lot of puns maybe?
I would say their kind of like everyday colloquial sense of humor is quite similar to ours. Like it's quite like kind of dark and quite dry. But then their TV comedy is like mental because it's sort of the stand up is so new there. It kind of the first stand up on TV was I think like 2012 maybe.
Right.
And so it's like it's doing the thing that all cultural things do in Russia, which is they pick something up from the West and it's massively behind, but also it develops way faster. So but as a result, it kind of like it's like a GMO vegetable or something. Like it grows weird.
Yeah.
Like there'll be like, you know, you got guys who are doing like material that's straight out of the 80s, like real like mother-in-law stuff, but they're picking up these like avant-garde like touches from like American comics they're watching on YouTube or whatever. So you get this sort of like weird mishmash guy just doing like straightforwardly sexist bits, but with these kind of like Stuart Lee touches, and you're like, what is going on here? It's sort of baffling mishmash.
bizarre.
Yeah. And yeah, so because so much of their comedy culture is informed by this thing called KVN, which is like it's like an old. The only way I can describe it, this is the best explanation I've come up with, is like, imagine, if you will, Morecambe and Wise, but it's competitive. So it's like, you have like teams.
Morecambe versus Wise.
Exactly, yeah. That's in the DC Comics universe, I believe. Yeah. Very, very difficult one. But yeah, so they have there'll be like teams of people in like suits, and they're doing these kind of skits on stage with microphones, as though they're not scripted, but they are heavily scripted and stilted. And then they're played in like leagues, and the top league is on television. But like every university will have like a team, And that's like how so many people get into comedy. But it's like there's a clip you can find online of Zelensky was like quite a successful KVN player, and obviously all the big leagues are in Russia. So like all the big Ukrainian teams, Belarusian teams, Kazakh teams, whatever, they would all go and play in the league in Russia. And so there's a clip of Zelensky as the captain of this team from like the University of Kiev or wherever it is, winning the league on Russian TV on like the state TV channel, and Putin is like the guest of honor judge, and it's like 2001 or something. Wow. So there's this video of them like interacting on stage.
That's insane.
Yeah, really mental. That's proper Adam Curtis shit.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
That is absolutely wild.
But
Imagine being like, he's just was doing comedy and stuff, and he's like,
I knew he was like a comedian, but is that what he was doing? Like he was
he more like an actor or kind of like sketch?
So he's
guy?
like, so this would have been, I think, before he was a professional comedian. So he was like a student maybe then, and then because obviously he's so much younger than Putin. I mean, he's probably 20 more years younger. And he he did that, and then he was like he's just been like a Ukrainian TV personality for a long time. He was like in sitcoms and like, I don't think he did stand up really, but like kind of
was his sitcom. Was it not like kind of the thick of it or something? It was like he played like the president or something like that in the TV show that he was in.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I just had a cursed thought, which I was it just, you know, when your subconscious just forms something and you catch it about to come out of your mouth. I was like, he was kind of like the Ukrainian James Corden, and it's led me down a horrible thought experiment of like, we're at war with Russia and James Corden is somehow the prime minister.
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised if he became prime minister. Yeah.
But so you ended up doing it. So what was the actual show like when you done the Russian live at the Apollo?
It was fun, I guess, for a time, but it was very like creatively restrictive, but like not in the ways you would think. So you could get away with like Putin jokes or whatever, because Putin, I don't think you could get away with this now in the current context, but at the time you could, because Putin jokes, you could always play both sides of the room, where it'd be like the people who like Putin are so insane and they so believe everything that Putin tells them and that he's a great man and whatever. And they can't comprehend that there are people who don't like Putin. So when you would do a Putin joke, those people would interpret it as a kind of ironic, like, oh, it's funny because Putin would never do this, of course, because he's a great man who he kisses tiger on the head and he helps school children walk to school. And then obviously people who hate Putin are like, yeah, of course. I did one joke about Putin on Russian TV, which I don't know if it's now been damnatio memoriae from Russian television archives, but it was I was talking about like awful Russian restaurants that you would go to on tour. In like, I was used to say you'd be relieved if there was a McDonald's in a town, both because it was a sign of quality about the town itself. And that was kind of like my Van Halen brown M&Ms. Was that if you went to a town and it had a McDonald's, you were immediately less worried about the show, about the kind of time you were going to have while you were there. Because it at least meant at a base level, you would be able to have a McDonald's if the worst came to the worst. And more,
if your goes badly, you can at least console yourself.
And more to the point, it meant the standard of other restaurants in the town would probably be higher, because it's the sort of town that's made it to the level of having a McDonald's. And but you'd often end up in these like shit kind of like, you know, they still think it's the Soviet Union restaurants.
Well, yeah, is it like, would it also, would that town be a bit more westernized as well, and would they have different views, or is it just simply because
guess,
you would like a McDonald's?
Yeah, sometimes the reception in smaller towns was quite good, because people were just kind of more happy that someone had come. Yeah. Like you'd get that kind of, often actually the worst places in Russia, I always said, were the medium-sized towns that actually weren't that far from Moscow, where it would be like, I guess you're kind of equivalent of the sort of like loads of money Essex people, but who would just be like a nightmare crowd. There's a town in Russia called Kursk, which in Russian terms is pretty close to Moscow. It's about like a 12-hour drive from Moscow or something, which in the terms of a country that's like, 15,000 kilometers long is actually pretty close. And so, yeah, we went there, and I went there twice, and every time I was like, this has got to be one of the worst places on earth. I mean, someone told me a story about Kursk. I remember one night we were in Kursk and we were like, what the fuck do you do in this town, Tim? Because we had like a day off in Kursk between two shows, because that was the way they used to organize it. And we were there and we were just looking around and we were just like, what the fuck do you do in this town? And we just looked around and there were just two dogs fucking in the middle of the street. It felt like a sign from God that like, no, leave this place. No good can come of it. But yeah, one of the other comedians told me a story about about Kursk, where he was like, oh, well, you know, in Russia, there are all these towns that they're called Gorod-Geroi, like the hero city. And so like you've got like the hero city of St. Petersburg, and there are a bunch of others. And these are all cities that were like pivotal in resisting the Nazis. So like there's like the siege of St. Petersburg, like Stalingrad, now Volgograd is like another one. And he was like, and Kursk was a massive battle in World War II, and it was like a huge tank battle. It was a big Soviet victory. And he was like, but he was like, Kursk is called a city of military significance. It's not called a hero city. Do you know why? And I was like, no. And he's like, because when the Nazis originally arrived in Kursk, the people of Kursk set out banquet tables and welcomed them.
Fucking hell.
And it's very, and I don't know if that story is true, but it's very much the vibe you get from the people of Kursk.
Right.
It's because they also call it the city of the 7 prisons. Because like in the Tsarist era, they built like a load of prisons there, and because there was like no way of getting back to your hometown, people would just leave prison and just stay. So it was kind of like the Russian Australia. Like, it was just like, it's like a city mostly made up of people descended from various convicts. And all of these things have come together in a beautiful melting pot for me to have one of the worst gigs of my career.
What made you leave and what made you come back? Did you just sort of done your time in Russia, would you say? And
yeah, I was just kind of over it. Like I feel like I'd both in a career sense, I felt like I'd learned in order to progress more in that environment, like to get more success in Russia, I would have had to have become a worse comedian, because they wanted you to do like very kind of like anodyne sort of 8-minute bits. Basically that was the route to success, and I was like, I just hate doing this. And I hated like so many of the people that I worked with. There are like some the correlation between people who I worked with who I liked and people who have like left the country as a result of the war is like quite high.
Wow.
And a lot of the people who I've stayed, I'm like, you seemed like the kind of guy who would stay. Yeah, that seems about right.
And was it not easier though to come back and do gigs in England after that, because you're like, I'm actually speaking to English speaking people and all this kind of stuff? Like, was it?
Yes, in that specific sense, but also having gotten used to like doing comedy in Russia was like what it was like doing comedy here in like the 80s, where like once you were like, you know, if you were just good, they were like, yeah, do you want to be on TV? Fine, cool, yeah. And then you were on TV, and so people just treated you with respect. You know, you go around, promoters would be like, yeah, of course, I'll organise the flights, the hotel. If there's anything you need, you'll be picked up from the airport. You'll be, you know, and you just kind of got used to being like treated like a professional, basically everywhere you went. And then you're coming back here, and it's just like, yeah, do you want to come to Derby for a tenner? I'll be treating you like a cunt the entire time, of course. I don't know why he has that voice. That's the wrong voice. That's just my go-to. My native.
So in Russia, like, could you do a tour show there? Would you still have a bit of a name? Or
I don't know. Occasionally it will come up. Like I did a show. Sometimes people book me to do Russian shows, like not in Russia. So like for like diaspora. So I sometimes get booked to do them in Prague. There's like so many Russian speakers there. And also in weirdly South Korea. I've done shows for Russian. Right. There's loads of Russians in South Korea because, okay, this is mental, right? There are a bunch of people who are ethnically Korean, but during like the late 19th century or early 20th century, there was a famine in Korea, and they were allowed by the Tsar at the time to go and farm land in eastern Russia. And over time, they basically just became Russian. Like they only spoke Russian. They had no real context of Korea. And then when Stalin got into power, he deported them all to Uzbekistan. So still in the Soviet Union, but like far away from Russia. And so then they were kind of like living as this like Korean looking, but Russian culturally diaspora in Uzbekistan. And then in like the 80s or 90s, the South Korean government started this policy of like anyone who's ethnically Korean can repatriate to South Korea, kind of like an Israeli style policy of like anyone who has a kind of a heritage can come here. And so then they all just like, well, Uzbekistan fucking sucks, so let's all just move. Like, obviously I know nothing about Korea, but let's just go there. And so they're this really interesting group of like, they look Korean, but they only speak Korean as a second language if they speak it at all. Wow. They're incredibly culturally Russian, so like, a lot of them don't even speak English. And then they're in this kind of like, so many of them are like really racist about Koreans in a way that's so funny because they are just the same race. but because they're so it's truly a proof that like multicultural integration does work, because they've become so Russian that they've taken on like Russian racial prejudices about them.
And this is leading to you having the best gig of your life.
No pictures, thankfully. Most of them were pretty nice, but I did find that I saw one guy, one of the Russian Koreans being racist about the Koreans, and I just thought it was so funny. But you know, when you can't let on that it's funny. You just have to kind of. But yeah, and there's sort of. So they're all like, I don't know. You find pockets of Russians in the strangest places. But yeah, so those are kind of the only gigs that I do. And then sometimes people will be like, "Oh, I really miss you on the TV or whatever," and I'm like, "But the TV was bad." And they were like, "Do you still watch the show?" And I'm like, "Obviously no, I didn't even watch it at the time. Even if I was on it, I was like fast forwarding. I wasn't watching the other bits."
That's great.
Yeah. It was a weird time.
When we were in Germany, there was a comedy show and it apparently just started, but it was called Lucky Punch Comedy Club, which was the only English that was spoken was when they said that that phrase.
So often.
But it was so interesting watching it on the telly because we had no idea what they were saying, but you could sort of tell what type of comics everybody was, and
just relating it to who would that be on the circuit.
It was really interesting, and you could sort of also tell like,
when your father, he had to go and fuck the train because they were converting the gauge from the East German beats to the West German beats, the standardization of the rail network.
The one thing I just want to ask you before you left, I'll just bring up because obviously we did both watch a special voicemail. And it's,
thank you.
It was very good. I really enjoyed it, and obviously that was you were talking about your parents passing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've had the experience to talk about that on stage as well, and I was just wondering how you felt doing a show like that, and what was it like for you?
Yeah, well, so I suspect that you would have found this as well, but I've not seen your bit about it. But I find that when I talk about my parents' deaths, the hardest bit is getting other people to find it as funny as I find it.
Yeah,
it's sort of a very like. Because I find that the experience of talking about it on stage isn't really emotional for me. No. That's more of like a cathartic. But then I find other people are like, they're not there yet. So you sort of find it, and then I often have to stop shows and be like, "It's my parents. Whose behalf are you offended on here?" I have this whole bit about like the absurdity of like trying to like, what do you do with the ashes?
Aye.
And I'm like, has anyone ever had to dispose of human remains? And like people are so upset by it, and it's very. But I can kind of get them on board by the end. But it's like honestly, it's as difficult as the 9/11 bit that I used to do.
How much you enjoyed it?
Basically, well, the bit was more or less. It was like, oh yeah. Well, the thing about 9/11 is whether you like it or not, it was really good terrorism, and like we have to acknowledge that. And I would kind of by the end of 5.5 minutes, I would like have people on board. But the first 2 minutes, people are like, what am I watching? Yeah. And I find it similar with the parents' death stuff. Like people are so like, oh my God, he's joking. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to look.
Yeah.
And they're acting like you've just brought it up at the pub.
I know.
Yeah.
Because people don't, I suppose that's the thing, because you don't really know what to do when somebody does bring it up in like a pub environment or something like that. Yeah. But do you know, it's the thing I felt about it was, it was hard when, they didn't get on board with it, but see, even if they didn't, you'd feel an atmosphere changing in the room, and suddenly it was like, you could just feel people paying more attention, or it was like, you're in a different place now than when you talk about other stuff, which was interesting. But
do you feel like, though, when you're talking about it, because you're maybe tense about what their reaction's going to be, do they feed off of that? Do you think it goes both ways? Or?
I think it always does with stand-up, really, doesn't it? Like, regardless of what you're talking about, there's always that kind of thing they can pick up for you, you're picking up for them, and it's like this sort of open loop or whatever. But I don't know. But did you find it difficult personally yourself to talk about? Because I was always concerned that, like, as long as I'm all right with this, I'm just wanting to make sure it's all right for the audience to hear and not burden them with it too much. But I guess it is like something that is hard to talk about as well.
Yeah, so I've never really, I think for me, I just sort of instinctively want to talk about stuff on stage. And I find that, and I think it's like kind of, my parents had quite a dark sense of humour. So I think I'm like, well, they would think it was funny. And then I had this, the show that I'm touring currently, Sentimental, which is the one after the one that you watched, it's called Sentimental because a reviewer called the show that you watched Unsentimental.
Which I think's mad, by the way, because I thought it was very beautifully done and was very sentimental, obviously. I felt.
And also you don't need to have like a big, this is really sad moment. Like you can talk about things like that and just it being funny. It doesn't need to be sentimental.
Well, I think a lot of reviewers are kind of like dogs in that they only hear tone. They can't really understand what you're actually saying. And so like it was one of those where it's like, because I'm making these kind of like flippant jokes about my parents, they're like, oh well, he must have like not really loved his parents, and it's like, no, there's a subtext, there's another layer on which the show is happening that is like a crust on the top of. But anyway, and so then I had this whole bit about like the show is basically about like sentimentality and like that kind of approach to, but then also in the show I've got a thing like where like, you know, and then my nan, you know, she was like, oh, it should have been me, and I'm like, objectively yes.
Absolutely.
Like, no, I don't want it. You're going like, no, but you're like, yeah, that definitely it should have been you. Yeah, like, I'm not, you know, you're 97 and you've not eaten solid food in 10 years. Like I do just think it would have been a better overall state of affairs for the universe if it had been you, but we are where we are. I'm not wishing you ill. And like you can get people on board with it, but I'm just like, but that stuff is funny because you do think that. You are like, yeah, it should have been you. Like,
yeah, no, absolutely.
But yeah, it makes people uncomfortable. But I think generally audiences, in the context of like an hour show, it works. But then sometimes I'll try and I've got a whole bit about like moving in with my parents. Like, we all moved in with our parents in our 20s, didn't we? And I'm like, of course, in my case, it's because they both successfully got cancer and died. But if we ignore that particular subtlety, then in a club, it like really like you can hear like audible like gasping in the room. Yeah. And I'm like, it's okay, I've got this.
Yeah.
You've been laughing for 10 minutes. It's fine.
Don't worry about it.
I'm not gonna bore you or upset you. It's okay.
That's interesting.
Just trust us.
Yeah. Your parents will probably live for a few years. So don't worry about it.
It'll never happen to you.
Yeah. They'll be fine.
But no, it was great. It's a great special, and I thought it was very sentimentally and funnily done. So
thank you so
highly
much.
recommend people watch it.
Yeah, I'm always so thrilled when I hear of anyone watching it. It's surreal. It's like, the whole thing. You're watching that.
There's a lot of enthusiastic comments as well. Actually, there's some Milo heads out there. It was on Russian. I didn't understand most of it.
Great work, comrade.
It's all stories. It's no jokes.
Yes, you are undermining their culture, making them more homosexual. They will not be able to resist our invasion.
Yeah. Milo, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been a delight.
I know you're currently on tour at the moment. I am. Unfortunately, some of the Scottish dates will be missed by the time this comes out. But have you got anything to plug?
What have I got to plug? I do if you can imagine the London equivalent of this podcast, that is kind of what Glue Factory is like. That's kind of a video comedy podcast. It's with me and Pierre Novelli and Olga Koch and Riley, who I do Trash Future with. Great. There's Trash Future, which is kind of like more of a politics. It's like an audio comedy about politics type show, but it's more of an acquired taste. Yeah.
Do you still do the Seinfeld one as well?
Yeah, so we still do. We've actually rebranded it because we ran out of Seinfeld. So
you've done them all?
Yeah, we've done it all.
Wow.
So we've now recruited a friend of ours he's an ancient history academic in the States, but he has a podcast about like ancient history, which is his podcast.
You're never going to run out of that.
No, exactly. Yeah. Well, if the Scottish education system is anything to go to, when we run out of that, we'll go on to World War II.
So, episode 1 Egyptians, episode 2 World War II.
Well, once we've gone through Byzantium, there will be like, and the natural next progression, the beer hall putsch of 1933. And so his podcast is serious, but he's been on a bunch of our other shows and he like loves joking around. So we've kind of started doing a show where we just talk about TV shows about the ancient world. So there's like a shit one called Those About to Die that's on Amazon Prime. That's like about gladiators, and Anthony Hopkins is in it for some reason. Oh yeah, I presume he's like appearing via Zoom. He seems like he's not happy to be there. So we're just kind of doing like the Seinfeld show, but doing a bit more classical history stuff, and it's a bit of fun.
Nice one. We'll check all that out for Milo online, and very highly recommended. Watch the specials and all that as well. And your other special you're talking about, Rash, I didn't get into.
Pindos, which is also on YouTube, and it's been much more successful on YouTube than voicemail. Like an order of magnitude more successful. Like voicemail's doing okay, but people fucking love Pindos. People just love stories about Russia.
There you go.
That's what I feel like I tell very boring stories about Russia today.
That's fascinating. Well, I'm going to watch it because I'd like to hear more.
Yes. There you go. There's a recommend.
But listen, thanks so much for joining us, mate.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Before we go, please do remember remember just to like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can follow us at Some Laugh Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, and send any question you've got to the email address, which is somelaughpod@gmail.com. There you go. Thanks very much.
That's so pro.
And well, you know, it's not just Jeremy Vine that knows what he's doing. So thanks.
Do call in.
And we'll speak to you very soon.
Cheers,
Cheers.
guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.